What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Did Ketel Marte reestablish himself as the best second baseman in the sport this season and handing out some Dbacks team awards for the 2024 season?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking. Yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we'll talk about the All-MLB nominations and see which D-backs are potentially going to be named to the team, and then handing out some team awards for both the position players and the pitchers on today's podcast. But first, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast and let's talk about the All-MLB team nominations because this was announced pretty recently. The nominees for who could be selected to the All-MLB team, and there were a couple of D-backs who were announced as well as nominees for one of those teams. And you can actually go to MLB.com and vote for the 2024 All-MLB team. The three D-backs who can potentially be named, you got Christian Walker at first, Ketel Marte at second base, and Eugenio Suarez at third, and actually a fourth guy and a fifth guy. I don't know why I said three guys. I was looking at this before I did the podcast, but only three guys came to my mind just now. Also, Corbin Carroll in the outfield and Jock Peterson at DH. So there's five potential D-backs that you can vote for the All-MLB team. So let's talk about each one's case and their potential ability to make it to the All-MLB team. Because right now for the voting, you can only vote for one player at each position. And this is, again, take into account both leagues. This is something new that baseball has implemented over the last few years. I think this started like the 2020 or the 2021 season. Basically, MLB's version of the All-NBA team or the All-Pro for NFL. And so there's a couple of All-MLB teams from both leagues trying to decide the best players at their position this MLB season. Now, at first base, you got Christian Walker in a pretty great field with other first basemen. They even got Luis Arraez listed as a first baseman with Freddie, Bryce Harper, Matt Olson, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Pete Alonso, Jake Berger. Like, this is a really loaded list. Josh Naylor, Vinny Pasquantino. Like, that is the full list of first basemen who are eligible. And I think Christian Walker had a fantastic season. I think if he didn't get hurt, he would have an even stronger case to the team, obviously, because I think he would have been right there near 40 home runs, over 100 RBIs pretty easily, maybe an OPS like 820 or more. Like, I think if Christian Walker doesn't get hurt, he might have finished maybe first or second among all first basemen in home runs. Like, Pete Alonso led it with 34 home runs. I think if Christian Walker doesn't get hurt, he's probably right around that number with more RBIs for sure than a Pete Alonso. Like, the RBI leader was Josh Naylor at 108. Christian Walker probably would have been right around the RBI and home run leader if he doesn't get hurt, but unfortunately he did. And so I don't think he's going to make it to the All MLB team, at least not the first team, because that's mostly what we're talking about today. The All MLB first team, and talking about guys who should get the vote. I don't think Christian Walker is getting the vote when looking at the field of all the first basemen in Major League Baseball from this season. I just don't think his numbers match up with some other guys, considering he missed some games due to injury this year. But when we look at second base, this is where I teased it in the opener. Has Ketel Marte reestablished himself as the best second baseman in the sport? Because when you look at Marte's numbers on the All MLB ballot compared to everyone else, it's not even close. Ketel Marte crushed every other guy in terms of home runs. The only guy with at least 25 home runs on the ballot at the second base position. Only guy with an OPS above 800 as well. Only guy with at least, 75 RBIs, it looks like. Like, Marte's running away with this one. So in terms of who should get the vote for second base on the All MLB team, it's Ketel Marte. It's not a discussion, and it's good to see Marte reestablish himself as the best player at his position, because he's been up and down the last few years. And in 2019, we were all saying Marte was the best second baseman in the sport. And then 2020, COVID shortened year, he had a weird season. So we didn't say after 2020. 2021, great year, but only played 90 games. So hard to give it to him after 2021. Very down season 2022. Bounced back in a big way last season, 2023, but I don't know if he bounced back in a way big enough where you would have said that's the best second baseman in the sport. But this season, the numbers tell you that he's the best second baseman, and the numbers even tell you he might even be deserving of like second place in MVP voting. So Ketel Marte is definitely getting a vote for the All MLB team. Shortstop, no Dbacks, unfortunately. If I had to pick a shortstop, it's probably going to be Francisco Lindor. I mean, he was clutch down the stretch. Actually, re-looking at the list, Lindor might be second or third on my list. I'm actually going to go with Bobby Witt Jr. after reevaluating the ballot real quick. Bobby Witt Jr., if Aaron Judge didn't exist, he would win MVP in the American League. So Lindor, if this was an NL only ballot, I would give it to Lindor. But since it's the All MLB ballot, I'm giving shortstop to Bobby Witt, who finished with insane video game numbers. Third base, Eugenio Suarez. He's listed here. And to be honest, he has a stronger case to be All MLB first team than a Christian Walker does, which sounds kind of crazy. Maybe when you think about the first half that Suarez had and, how we all feel about Christian Walker. But looking at third base this season, not the strongest field in competition compared to most years. Like, Devers had a good year, 870 OPS, but the numbers don't jump off the page. Like, Suarez had more home runs and RBIs than Devers, despite Devers having a better OPS. Jose Ramirez, I think, is the guy that's going to win this because, again, he doesn't look like a guy that's a speedster, but he was one home run shy of a 40-40 season with 118 ribbies and 872 OPS. I think Suarez, you can make the argument, second best season or third best season among third basemen this season. I think it'd go Jose Ramirez. Then after that, it's probably Rafael Devers second. And then I think third is really up for grabs. You could go Jazz, you could go Suarez, Manny, Baum, Chapman. Like, I think the field is very close for who had like the third best season among third basemen this season. But I think it was clearly Jose Ramirez who deserves that vote for first place on the All MLB team. But Eugenio Suarez, when looking at him compared to the rest of the field, definitely deserving of consideration when looking at the other names. DH, again, this is one that doesn't take a lot of thought. And to be honest, looking at Jock Peterson, you would think, knowing Jock Peterson, his numbers, you would think he would have a really credible case. The issue is DH is absolutely loaded. I mean, of course, you got Shohei Ohtani. You also have Marcell Ozuna. You got Yordan Alvarez from the American League, who had a 308 average, 35 home runs, and a near 1,000 OPS. You had Brent Rooker on the A's, who had 39 bombs, 112 RBIs, double-digit steals, and 927 OPS. Like, DH is loaded, and Jock Peterson's probably going to finish like dead last on this ballot for the DH position, which sounds insane because he had such a great season, but the field is more loaded at the DH position than any other one on the ballot. And then Corbin Carroll. I was actually a little surprised when I was looking at the ballot that the fact that Corbin Carroll was on it. I was surprised when looking at the pitchers, especially the relievers, that maybe a guy like Justin Martinez or AJ Puck didn't get any consideration. Not too surprised that Zach Gallen didn't get consideration for the starters. But I thought maybe a Jamar or Puck would get a little love for the relievers. And now we're seeing Corbin Carroll actually get little love for the outfielders. And I don't think anyone's voting for Corbin Carroll. If you're looking at the ballot, Corbin Carroll probably has the worst numbers outside of Dalton Varsho on this ballot for outfielders in 2024. And so I can't even vote for Corbin Carroll as the locked on D-backs guy. I mean, Aaron Judge is on the list, Mookie Betts, Jaron Duran had a great season. He's on the list. Juan Soto's on the list. He had a great season. It's kind of funny seeing Dalton Varsho on the list because his numbers just aren't there, but we know how great he is defensively, and that's why he gets the acclaim that he's getting to be even considered to be on the All-MLB ballot, despite his offense not being there. But looking at Carroll compared to the rest of these guys, even as a Locked On D-backs host, I would probably put Carroll near the bottom of my own ballot. Santander, 44 home runs, like he's on this ballot as well. And so for which D-backs are going to be named to an All-MLB team, I think it's going to be just Ketel Marte. And that's all right, guys. Ketel Marte reestablished himself as the best second baseman in the sport in 2024. Let's take that to the bank. Now I want to hand out some awards for the D-backs in segment number 2. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And also, if you want to place a little wager this NFL Sunday, because, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So we can get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Right now, whenever NFL Sunday rolls around, I'm a Saints guy. Sorry, Cardinals fans. I like the Saints. So I like to take Kamara over on receptions. I take Taysom Hill anytime touchdown because you never know. Give me the Saints money line. That 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. If you want a big smile on your face, visit FanDuel. You get started with over $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's hand out some team awards, and we are going to start with the position players, and we're going to start with the top, the MVP of the D-backs this season, because this was the easiest award to give out, and it is clearly Ketel Marte. No drum roll, no suspense. It's like, I don't like the NFL draft or any draft for that matter with the #1 pick and they use the whole clock. I know you got to do it, commercials, marketing, advertising, whatever. I don't want to waste my time. And so we're not going to waste your time here on the Locked On D-backs podcast. Ketel Marte, MVP of the D-backs this season. Like I said, reestablished himself as the best player at his position. 932 OPS leads the team. 292 average leads the team. 36 home runs leads the team. 95 RBIs. Second to Eugenio Suarez with 101. He had himself a fantastic offensive season. You look at the splits, it does not matter. Early in the game, late in the game, clutch situations, like you look up any kind of situation Ketel Marte thrived in this season, and he's arguably the best player in baseball against left-handed pitching. You would think it's Aaron Judge. Go look up who has like the most home runs this season against left-handed pitching and who has crushed left-handed pitching the most like over the last 3 years. It's Ketel Marte. He is the MVP of the D-backs. But here's an award. Who's the best non-Marte hitter this season? There are some obvious candidates, but I'm going to actually go with someone who only had a half season of being a good baseball player, but his half season was so good. He was being compared to guys like Babe Ruth, the legend, Eugenio Suarez. I'm giving him the award for best non-Marte hitter this season. Honorable mention, Christian Walker. You could definitely given it to him. If he plays a full season, I think Christian Walker gets this award, but you cannot deny the eliteness of Eugenio Suarez in the second half of the year. If you literally split his season in half, first 81, second 81, he was a different player the second 81 of the season. And if you just want to go post All-Star break, Suarez, 307 average, 942 OPS in 65 games with 20 home runs and 53 ribbies. He was insane the second half of the season. As I've always said on the podcast, I was disappointed with him not batting higher in the lineup, not batting cleanup. It was one of my big gripes I had, but Suarez absolutely tore the cover off the baseball in the second half. And now the D-backs are definitely picking up his option this offseason to bring Suarez back next year. So we'll get at least one more season of Suarez, who turned 33 in July. So he's not too old, should have at least one more really good season left in the tank after having seriously one of the best seasons of his career. So very excited for you, Eugenio Suarez next year once again. Who was the clutchest hitter on the D-backs team this season? This answer might surprise you because we're not going with like a Ketel Marte. We're not going with Christian Walker. We're going to go with a guy who had a tough time cracking the lineup, but when he did play, he was by far the clutchest. Randall Grichuk destroyed for the D-backs with runners in scoring position this season. 1051 OPS, 324 average at runners in scoring position. He was a monster this year with runners in scoring position. And it's not just runners in scoring position. You look up scoring position in 2 outs. Randall Grichuk is batting like over 400, like a 1400 OPS. You look up late in close situations. That's seventh inning or later with and the game's like within like 3 runs or something. Like Randall Grichuk also dominates in those scenarios. Anytime you filter the stats for late game situations, RBI situations, clutch situations, anything like that, Grichuk destroyed this year for the D-backs. Best player also off the bench in terms of pinch hitting. The definition of clutchness, late game situations off the bench. He only needed one at bat in a game to come through for your team. I don't think he's returning next season. I really hope he does. I love the season Randall Grichuk had. He was the clutchest D-back, with the honorable mention being the other DH, Jock Peterson. You filter any clutch stat, it's Grichuk and it's Jock like 1 and 2 in almost every category. So he was the honorable mention here. Most frustrating D-back this season. I'm going to give this one to Corbin Carroll, who never was able to find his footing, did improve in the second half of the season, but didn't improve the way Eugenio did, where he actually finished the year so strong. We remember 2024 now being a positive Suarez year, actually a career year for Suarez, one of his best seasons of the last few years. Corbin Carroll, way better in the second half as well. 919 OPS in his last 64 games in the second half of the season. So he was way better as well. It just didn't feel as strong as the Eugenio. One is probably because Eugenio also had like a 307 average. So he just collected so many hits. Carroll, it was more power for him, a 568 slugging in the second half of the season. He still only had a 259 average, but the reason he was frustrating is because of the up and down nature of his season, the amount of times we saw him hit weak pop-ups, hit the ball into the ground, and just the terrible first half he had. He was able to pick it up in the second half of the season, but still a lot of moments where he frustrated us and we never got to see him like there was never a stretch or too many stretches this season where you're like, okay, he just routed off 8 straight games of dominance. Like Jake McCarthy, Marte, Suarez, like up and down the lineup. Even guys like Gabriel Moreno, they each had like little mini stretches or long stretches where you're like, that guy is locked in. He's on a 2-week tear where he is destroying the baseball right now. And for Corbin Carroll, I don't feel like we got that. He did have a super long hitting streak at one point during the season, but if you also remember, at the same time during the hitting streak, it was like, wait, is Carroll's average going down during the hitting streak? So he did get on base a lot throughout the year, but you didn't feel like he didn't string together too many blow up games. I think that was the thing. There was a lot of games where maybe he had a single or maybe he had a walk and like a stolen base, but I don't think he strung together these monster explosion games. And I think that was really missing from Carroll's overall season this year. So I'll say he's the most frustrating guy with an honorable mention going to a Lourdes Gurriel, who just like a Corbin Carroll had a very up and down season, but did finish strong for the D-backs. Biggest surprise for the D-backs this season, good or bad? I'm going to go positive. Jake McCarthy hit a wall in the month of September. McCarthy, same OPS as Corbin Carroll, both had a 749, but McCarthy, 285 average, and at one point was carrying this D-backs team offensively. From July through August, McCarthy was insane. He hit a wall in September, but he was so good for the D-backs when they were really dealing with injuries with Marte and Walker. McCarthy carried this team so much, and Gurriel was down too. Like McCarthy was so important to what the D-backs did this season. Really strong year for him. Destroyed left-handed pitching, which was so important for him as a left-handed hitter. The only opportunity for him to crack the lineup to begin the year was to have success against left-handed pitching, and 284 average against lefties, 286 average against righties. Good job, Jake McCarthy. A nice season from you. Really held it down. Nice surprise season from Jake McCarthy. The final award I want to give out here is the guy to watch out for next season from the D-backs lineup. I'm going to go with Gabriel Moreno. You might be a little surprised because he finished the year, when you just look at the slash line, 266 average, 734 OPS, only 5 home runs in 97 games. Like nothing that makes you go, oh my God. But again, he's another one of those guys. When you look at the second half stats for Moreno, not large, but 25 games, a 333 average, a 847 OPS. And basically from July through the end of the season, this guy was over a 300 hitter. He was really good his last like 40-ish games of the season from a hitting standpoint. Before he got hurt with the big injury, he was batting second a lot in this D-backs lineup. I think Moreno really found something in his swing those last like 30 to 40 games of the year. I think next season we could see a big offensive showing from Moreno. I don't know if the power is going to be there. That's always the question for him. But maybe he could have that Pavin Smith breakout season where all of a sudden he's hitting for power. But I could see like a 290 season with maybe a bunch of doubles, because he did have 18 doubles this year, which was kind of high. I mean, he only played 97 games, so 18 doubles is a pretty good mark. More doubles than Jock Peterson, who played 132 games. A guy like Geraldo Perdomo had 21. I mean, Curiel and Corbin Carroll each had 22 doubles. Moreno had 18. So I think Moreno could have a big offensive showing in 2025 based off how he finished this season in 2024. Now we'll hand out some awards, like who was the D-back Cy Young winner by my standards in 2024. We'll hand out that award in segment number 3. But hey, if you are planning to take a little trip to maybe your baseball rival city during this postseason, then you need to book your accommodation through booking.com, because this episode is brought to you by booking.com, booking.yeah. Explore those US cities you always secretly want to learn more about with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city during postseason. Booking.com delivers exactly the right stay for you. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfasts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, booking.yeah. All right. Let's get back to the Lockdown Diamondbacks podcast. Let's hand out some pitcher awards for the D-backs this season. Who was the D-backs Cy Young Award winner. Who was their best pitcher from start to finish? Because I do think there was a guy who was the best pitcher for the D-backs, but he didn't pitch the whole season with Arizona. So I'm actually going to give it to Justin Martinez, which I think is still a fine take to have because Martinez had himself a very strong year. You could also say he was the breakout player for the D-backs pitching staff as he had himself a sub 3 ERA, 2.48 ERA. One thing that surprised me when looking at the stats, he only had 8 saves. Still, Paul Sewald had double the saves, 16. Justin Martinez had double the innings of Paul Sewald and still only had half the saves. That really tells you about the lack of commitment to J Mart as the closer of the season, which again was a gripe we had with Torey Lovello. I know some people were like a little iffy on J Mart being the closer of the season. He had a 2.48 ERA, guys. Outside of AJ Puck, like who else was doing that for the D-backs this season? Who else would you have really wanted? 11 strikeouts per 9 innings as well. Walks are a little bit of a problem for him. Gives up some hard contact from time to time, but J Mart is the closer of the future for the D-backs, and he was the Cy Young Award winner from start to finish for Arizona this year. How about the most reliable reliever, though? J Mart's a Cy Young, but who is the most reliable reliever from game to game? This one I think is AJ Puck pretty easily. J Mart from game 1 to game 162 was the most valuable, but AJ Puck, once he came over from Miami, immediately was the best. There's a reason why Torey Lovello tried to make him like the pseudo closer down the stretch. I mean, you look at the numbers for Puck, insane. 27 innings pitched with Arizona, a 1.32 ERA, a .732 whip, 4.9 hits per 9 innings, and 14.2 strikeouts per 9 innings. Like, insane video game numbers for AJ Puck on this D-back staff this season. He was easily the most reliable D-backs reliever from game to game when he came over from Miami. So I give it to AJ Puck. What honorable mentions going to J Mart once again, and also Kevin Ginkel, Ryan Thompson, who definitely faltered that last month, but in the middle of the season, those chunk months, they were really shut down, guys. So I still want to give them some love. Who is the D-backs' best starter this season? If you go by ERA, which we're not going to do, you would say Zach Gallen, but Zach Gallen was a little up and down, dealt with injuries. He only made somehow he still made 28 starts. It doesn't feel like he made that many. Still at 148 innings pitched, and he had a 3.65 ERA. But despite all that, it felt like a very up and down season. So many starts where he left early, so many starts where he dealt with either cramp or he was giving up home runs or the command wasn't there and he was just walking a ton of dudes. Like, it was just a weird year for Zach Gallen. I still think he's a stud, still think he's the ace of this D-back staff, but I want to show some love to Ryan Nelson. I'm going to give him this award, best D-back starter this year, outside of Zach Gallen, and I guess of Merrill Kelly too. Ryan Nelson had the best ERA. So I guess you can't really say that if you have to take out like half the rotation. But Ryan Nelson, 4.24 ERA. And again, if you do the splits, second half of the season, he had like a 3.2 ERA post All-Star break. Ryan Nelson, for like a 2-month stretch, like a 10-week stretch, easily the best D-back starter, and was not just the best D-back starter, was like one of the best starters in baseball, was truly dominant and looked really good against opposing teams. And so Ryan Nelson right now in line to maybe fight for a spot in the rotation next season. Ken Kendrick is already doing the media press tour to make sure Jordan Montgomery doesn't pick up his option. So if Monty does not pick it up, I really like Ryan Nelson to be the D-backs number 5 starter next year. Who is the D-backs most frustrating pitcher from this season? I think it's clearly the man who at one point was blowing saves night after night. And if he blew one less save, the D-backs would be in the playoffs right now, but we can't play that game. Paul Sewald, pending free agent. No one wants to see him return except maybe Mike Hazen and the D-backs front office. I know the D-backs fan base does not want to see him return. And not surprising, he was not good for the D-backs this season. I don't think the numbers are as bad as what the eye test shows because a 4.31 ERA I don't think is terrible. Plus, almost double-digit strikeouts per 9. Pretty good walk rate. Like, the whip isn't terrible as well. Like, the underlying numbers are solid enough where I think someone else should sign Paul Sewald this offseason. It just shouldn't be the D-backs. Most surprising pitcher for the D-backs this season. Oh, and if you want to go with honorable mention for most frustrating, I mean, there was actually a ton of guys you could have done there. I probably should have honestly went with Jordan Montgomery. I think I was only thinking relievers when I did that award. So maybe you want to go with Jordan Montgomery. Maybe you want to go with Erod. Honestly, you could give that award to any one of those guys. I don't mind. If you want to go with someone worse, like a Scott McGuff, uh, a Brandon Hughes, like you could also do that. I'm going with Paul Sewald because if he didn't, he had that little streak of blowing saves night after night. And the fact when you just have a bad closer, I just think it's more frustrating than anything because you've gone through 8 innings potentially of your team winning a ball game, and then you go into that final inning needing 3 outs, and your guy can't get it done. Especially when we're going against some of the best teams in the sport, like the Dodgers and other teams in July, when Paul Sewald was blowing it night after night. I know Monty has been bad this season, but nothing. I think a bad closer frustrates me more than a bad starter. So I'm giving it to Paul Sewald. Biggest surprise from the D-backs pitching staff. I'm going with maybe someone who is flying a little bit under the radar because we hadn't seen him pitch since July. But I thought Bryce Jarvis was really good for the D-backs this season. And it felt like his role was growing as the season went on. Still a guy where probably gives up too many walks. The walk rate wasn't good. Strikeout rate isn't good, but 3.19 ERA, and I just thought he was solid as a long reliever. I thought he was heating up in those middle months too. Like he would have been one of those guys if he pitched the full season. We would have looked at his second half and been like, "Whoa, look at Bryce Jarvis!" And also maybe he would have gotten a look in the rotation when there was injuries. And we had to put like Monty back in the rotation. Maybe we would have went with like Bryce Jarvis over Jordan Montgomery at that time. And so Bryce Jarvis, we haven't seen him in a while, but he still finished the year with more innings pitched than a Erod and one less out recorded than Joe Mansply. That should let you know how big of a workload Bryce Jarvis had this season before going down. Didn't even record a start yet this season. And also 17 games finished. Like he had more games finished than even a Kevin Ginkel this year, who was fourth on the team. So that tells you how important Bryce Jarvis was before he went down. Then the final award we're going to hand out today, the player to watch out for next season. Again, I think it's going to be Brandon Pfaadt. One of my predictions in the second half of the season was Pfaadt was going to finish top 10 in Cy Young voting. That's not going to happen, but I still believe in Pfaadt. I think he hit a wall in the second half because of the workload that was placed on him. I think Fott is going to be really, really good next season. If we could get healthy rotation from the other guys where we don't have to put everything on Fott's plate, I think Fott could actually finish top 10 in Cy Young voting in 2025. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight, as we'll talk about the silver linings to the D-back season in 2024. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.